Hi, everybody. My name is Taylor Jerusik, and I did my presentation on Rosa or Rosie. So presenting issues and reason for referral. Rose is a 25-year-old Guatemalan indigenous woman living in Antigua, Guatemala. Rose was just recently discharged from the hospital for a suicide attempt. Rose attempted suicide by cutting her wrist and states she is a shame and to everyone that knows her. Presenting problem and reason for referral. Rose was born and grew up in a small village with her parents. When Rose was 15, she witnessed the murder of her father and the rape and murder of her mother. Rose was also raped, and so was Rose's 13-year-old sister. Rose and her sister moved 40 miles away to Antigua to live with their aunt and uncle. Now 25, her trauma is reactivated when she becomes close to a man who wanted to marry her from her church. Rose suddenly became depressed, ashamed, and consumed with guilt, with the idea of being intimate with or having an intimate relationship with this guy. Rose then tried to take her own life. What is going on with the individual? Rose had just recently started dating a man who she had started to develop romantic feelings for. The new emotions of becoming close to a man triggered Rose's trauma of witnessing her mother and father being murdered. Rose and her sister were also raped by the masked parliamentary soldiers. Rose's immediate environment. Rose lives in Antigua, Guatemala with her aunt and uncle. When Rose moved in with her aunt and uncle, she started working at her uncle's grocery store and still works there now. Her school. Rose worked at home and attended school. That was very common for Indigenous people to help on the farm or help at home and put in hours in school. Rosa's parents wanted her to advance her education, but needed help on the farm day to day. Rose states she did well in school, but took a liking to Spanish literature the most and was the best reader in her class by the time she was finished with the 8th grade. She stopped attending school at age 14. Social support and faith communities. Rosa has the support of her aunt and uncle since they took her in after her parents' murders. Rose belongs to the Catholic faith. Rose believes God doesn't want her to live in vain for what had happened to her when she was 15. Rose is very well respected at her job working at her uncle's grocery store. She does well with the customers and has developed relationships with other women in the village. In the village, she would go there to buy the supplies for the grocery store. She had good relationships with the girls that she bought stuff from. She had really good support and was really well respected. Social positioning factors and experiences. Guatemala is a country of nearly 8 million people, most of which are of the indigenous descent. Most people living there are poor farming families that don't have access to healthcare and other modern resources. In 1954, the current government that was focused on land reform and progressive social welfare was overthrown by right-wing factions supported by the Central Intelligence Agency. Since then, right-winged parliamentary death squads have been responsible for over 200,000 deaths. The vast majority of those deaths were innocent farmers. So at first, it's good to note that it was more targeted at policymakers because they wanted to overthrow it. And it just ended up mainly being a lot of tension between the villages and the soldiers. And so subsequently, the farmers were the ones that were more targeted. social experience, the overturning of the government and the beginning of oppression and torture from right-wing parliamentary death squads affected Rose and her family. Rose's dad mistrusted the soldiers who frequently invaded their village. One night, officers came to the house to speak with Rose's father outside. She heard yelling and a thump. Her dad was injured. The next night, masked men broke into the house and killed her father and her mother. Rosa's strengths. I would say Rosa is a pretty strong woman. Rosa witnessed a very traumatic event and is able to move past it. Rose found work in a town that has little job opportunity. Her aunt and uncle took her in and provide her support. Rosa comes across as quiet and shy, but is very strong. I would also like to mention that her Catholic faith, even though for a while she wasn't attending a lot of church, is a strength of hers because it gives her a good belief system. Client-centered theory. So my first theory that I think would apply to Rosa. Rogers' client-centered theory is humanistic in that it honors the inherent worth and dignity of each individual. Client-centered theory is a non-directive approach that challenges the notion that the social worker is the expert and can solve all clients' problems. Client-centered theory is broad and can be applied to all three levels of social work practice: micro, meso, and macro. The article Client-Centered Therapeutic Relationships, Conditions, and Authenticity states Rogers' 6 conditions are necessary and sufficient for constructive change, psychological contact between the therapist and the client's state of incongruence, the therapist's congruence, the therapist's unconditional positive regard, the therapist's empathetic understanding, and the client's reception of the therapist's empathetic understanding and unconditional positive regard. Rationale for the use of client-centered theory. Using client-centered theory in helping Rose would give her control and power over her own life and how she wants to handle the situation. From the article, What is Client-Centered Theory? The article states the importance for the client to realize that they are the expert in their own lives. Rose asked the social worker how he was going to help her. Using the theory, Rose will decide what she wants to do, and the social worker will encourage and support her every step of the way. Using this theory, instead of giving advice for the client, social worker can provide guidance when client is lost. Implementation of client-centered theory. When working with Rose using client-centered theory, the first thing I would do is establish a professional but affirming relationship with Rose. I would then build up Rosa's self-image. She states she is ashamed of what happened and is consumed with a lot of guilt, feels worthless and to those around her. I would need to address this and encourage and show her that that is simply not true. So cognitive behavioral therapy is my next one, and it's behavioral theory discusses how our actions are affected by what happened before a behavior and the consequences that follows. Cognitive theory builds on behavior theory to suggest that our thoughts and are not just consequences influencing our behavior. These two mid-level theories are often discussed together and are implemented together. Rationale. From the article, What is Cognitive Behavioral Therapy? The article states CBT has been found most effective with people suffering from depression and anxiety disorders. Rose has stated she is depressed and views herself as worthless. Rose is establishing maladaptive thinking that can be corrected with CBT. From the article, Neurocognitive Performance Predicts Treatment Outcomes with Cognitive Behavioral Therapy for Major Depressive Disorders, mentioned CBT will reduce distress and depressive symptoms because the therapy aims to change the way we think. Rose developing coping skills to manage her depression and intrusive thoughts will improve her mood and outlook on life. Implementation. The article Adaptive School-Based Implementation of CBT states it is crucial to have strategies available for clients struggling with mental health disorders. Dismantling and cognitive restructuring allow the client to think in new ways about their current situations or past trauma. Our textbook expands on these interventions to include behavioral actions, reinforcement scheduling, and psychoeducation. I can teach Rose on a one-on-one to think more positive and teach her how to replace her negative thoughts with thoughts that are more accurate to her situation. I would also encourage her to practice new behavior. Strengths and limitations of CBT from the case study. A strength of CBT is that it has been well researched and established as an effective treatment option for a wide range of individuals. It has also been proven to be effective for depression and anxiety disorders. A limitation worth noting is that CBT only focuses on the person, not the macro systems in which the person is part of. Rose is dealing with depressive thoughts and could benefit from CBT to help her learn healthy coping skills. The trauma stems from her parents being murdered by government soldiers, and her family were not the only ones affected by the right-winged ideals and destruction. CBT can't help her tackle the macro issues of the death squads and oppression inflicted by them. Strengths and limitations of client-centered theory. Client-centered theory is broad and can be applied to all three levels of social work. It promotes the dignity and worth of the client. It can be useful when working with multiple cultural groups. The limitations worth noting is that it has little to no guidance when it comes to practice. Rose stated she was looking for help from the social worker and wants the social worker to provide her with tools to move past her trauma. My recommendations. I would actually go ahead and recommend CBT. Despite its limitations of practice on a macro level, I feel it is the best for Rose right now. Rose is struggling with maladaptive thoughts. Rose has a good job and social support from church and her aunt and uncle that provide her quality of life. Client-centered theory would provide her self-worth and dignity, but wouldn't give her the coping skills she needs to overcome the trauma. Additional issues and final thoughts on Rose. Client stated she doesn't talk to anyone about the incident with her parents and has tried to push it out of her mind for the last 10 years. I think she would benefit from group therapy or even just talking to her family about the situation. Seeking help for mental health services has a stigma around it in her country. Mental health services are hard to find and establish and obtain. Guatemala is a very impoverished country that could make it hard for the client to keep receiving the services she needs. The oppression and destruction of multiple villages by government death squads in squads impacting not just Rose is an issue that needs to be addressed. Advocacy for more resources for members of the villages could help not just Rose, but everyone suffering from the oppression. And my 6 references, and thank you so much.